For those of you joining us today, I know you might look and think, what does a smoking car have to do with a conference on AI? I can honestly say, a whole lot. The year is 2027, and the long-standing tensions between the Purple Alliance and the Gray Area have developed into full-on conflict. And of course, the Orange Alliance will not stand idly by. Look, this is too complicated of a situation to just briefly explain. So, for those of you joining us today, here's just a little bit of what you missed.
Oh shit.
Miss Williams, talk to me.
I think the Purple Alliance is planning an attack on the Grey Area, so...
We need to be entirely sure. If the information is false, the consequences are incalculable. So I need you and Eckerly to come up with an assessment of how useful the AIDS model is and how we can use the information it gives us.
Okay, so I'm gonna try and give an update from time to time from now on. This morning we had the surreal experience of sound of bombs hitting.
Lieutenant Saidi, how are we doing?
Not nearly there, Major. I have one unit ready, but we're still waiting on one of them.
How?
This is bad.
Major Miller, sorry for interrupting, but you've got to see this. These social media images from people in the Grey Area just came in. Shots are being fired from high up in the air. Might be drones.
Sorry, you need to see this.
Captain Paris, drones are confirmed.
We need answers.
I'm thinking we should use the counter-drone system delivered by the Pink Country.
It may have been tested in the past, but what guarantees does that give us now? Can we have confidence in the application of AI in this specific situation?
If I adhere to the rules of engagement, I cannot take the risk to deploy this system that we cannot blindly rely on. You two, please, and Miss Williams, keep up what you're doing and keep me informed of new developments.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Lieutenant Saidi, I want you to engage right away.
I'm sorry, ma'am. We're not at full strength yet. I need at least 10 more minutes, ma'am.
You need to attack now.
We need to hurry. I'm scared.
Baby, come on, it's gonna be okay.
Over 12 hours have passed since Major Miller ordered Lieutenant Saidi to launch the counterattack. Even though the manpower was not yet at full strength, the Major could fully understand and no longer sit by as people were victimized by everything going on. Fortunately now, relatively speaking, a day later, it seems as if the Orange Alliance is finally having a strong hold. The deployment of ground troops, especially the information given from the AI decision support system, have been instrumental in destroying all of the non-state actors group Bucks's drones. The troops of the Purple Alliance are also increasingly cornered and suffering heavy losses. Naturally, the Purple Alliance will not go easily, and the Orange Alliance is hatching a new plan of attack.
Williams, Eckerly, we are receiving information. 5 major power plants have been shut down. It looks like the 6th and the 7th will shut down soon. That means half the country is without power.
Analyzing these codes, it looks like the Purple Alliance has carried out a large-scale cyber attack, sir.
It's confirmed. It's the Purple Alliance attacking us. Can we counterattack?
Yes, sir. We could attack their transportation system, but then they won't be able to supply their cities anymore.
So this is going to have major consequences. Copy. I'll tell Commander Vandenberg to take this up to the Commander-in-Chief. This decision must be made at the political level. Good work, you two. Commander Vandenberg? Yes, I have news on the situation.
What Mr. Fahim just said is 100% correct. A decision with such far-reaching consequences can only be made at the political level. So that's exactly what he did. He took it up with his Supreme Commander, and then he waited. After long and careful consideration on the impact and consequences of not striking back, Vandenberg receives word that the Orange Alliance chooses to deploy the counterattack. Like Sarah and Rob predicted, that counterattack caused the traffic in the Purple Alliance to shut down. By then, the Purple Alliance finds itself in a predicament and knows that the Orange Alliance is capable of taking out its very vital infrastructures. So for now, it seems as if the Purple Alliance is left with only one option.
Lieutenant Saidi, I hear they're retreating.
That's correct, ma'am. The Purple Alliance is retreating.
The Purple Alliance is retreating. I repeat, the Purple Alliance is retreating.
Yes! Oh my God!
Yes! Good job, everyone.
So, good morning, everyone. Again, an impressive opening of our second day of the REAIM 2023 conference. Of course, I hope that you've enjoyed the first day with our full-packed program, and today it will be no different. We have many breakout sessions, the Innovation Hub, several demonstrations, a student lounge, continuous online program, of course. And in addition to that, today we'll be hosting the political segment. Ministers and other political representatives of 80 countries will be engaging in a round table today. But before that all happens, we'll first listen to two other panels. We'll be debating two other dilemmas in the morning, accountability and governability. In the video you've just watched, we saw how a decision to take out critical infrastructure was taken up to the political level. Accountability is pivotal to prosecute those responsible for violations of international law, including the law of armed conflict. And as a cornerstone of international legal order, accountability is directly connected to ensuring justice. In the military context, accountability is assigned through a clear chain of command. This chain of command does not only establish accountability, but it also lays out lines of authority and decision-making power within the military organization in question. As AI is increasingly relied on within the practice and in the military domain, some parties may argue that the deployment and use of AI and other new technologies will blur the military chain of command. Others, on the contrary, argue that the person in charge will always be accountable, regardless the information and the support it relies on for making the decision. And these voices state that AI will not affect the existing military chain of command. In all, we have a lot to discuss today, and I have 5 guests, as you may see already in regard to the chairs. First, may I invite Professor Stuart Russell, the founder of the Center for Human Aligned AI at the University of California in Berkeley. Welcome. Give him some applause. Hi. Marietje Schaake, you're the International Policy Director of Stanford University Cyber Policy Center. Welcome. Professor Mary Ellen O'Connell, you're Professor of Law and a Professor of International Peace Studies at the University of Notre Dame. Mr. Peter Bedoire, you're the Chief Technology Officer at SAP. Welcome. And General Jörg Vollmer, the Chief Advisor Military Affairs at Fraunhofer Institute, and you're the former Chief of the Germany Armed Forces and the former Commander at NATO Allied Forces Joint Command in Brunssum. Welcome.
Thank you.
As you can see, we have a very full panel. First, we'll discuss the issue of accountability. We have a short intermezzo, and then we'll continue with the governability. Professor O'Connell, maybe I can start with you. Yesterday, we already saw that there's no AI without context. What would be the legal frameworks of operating AI systems in the military domain?
That's a gigantic question. Let me at least emphasize where we should start. What are the first principles from which we should build today? And I always think, especially today, this is an essential question to think about where we start, because we've gone forward with a trend since the development of unmanned vehicles to thinking that we just need to find the legal loophole to use the newest technology. In our desire to be ahead in the technological competition that countries have going on right now, the interest is always staying with the advantage to have the next breakthrough. And that has led to a view that the rules can be adapted to meet the technology so that we can meet this paradigm of defense. That has led us into a very dangerous place where we've almost forgotten that there's any law worth understanding and looking to before we go forward with these technologies. In fact, the law is immutable in its most foundational principles. We have ancient ethical principles that have driven and developed the core principle of all international law, and that is that force is prohibited in the first instance. There is no right to use offensive force. You may use force to defend against an ongoing actual attack, but not to try to preempt and create a future scenario of security for you by defeating and attacking your enemies. So this has its current codification in the UN Charter Principle, Article 2, Paragraph 4, that prohibits all general offensive use of force. You must start there and then see if your weapons are going to seduce you, bring you into using force offensively, as we're seeing today, frankly, with the use of drones. And I fear that AI weapons, because they have that much less accountability, which my co-panelists will talk about, are really going to take us there. So let's go back to the principle that all force, offensive force, is prohibited. All force must, and that rule, we can be even more fundamental when we say that's how we protect the human right to life. That's what must be front and center in all these discussions as we go forward.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Russell, what would you consider the most important or the current risk in regard to accountability and the use of AI in the military domain?
So I think the main risk that AI introduces is perhaps an extra level of difficulty in attribution. If any of you have seen the Slaughterbots movie, that describes a large-scale attack in a civilian context, and there's no way to establish attribution for the attack because there's a geographical separation between the people who initiate the attack and the actual site. The devices themselves are all destroyed. They don't carry the information about where they came from or what orders were given. I think in terms of, at the command center level, it would be a good idea to require permanent records of what mission is given to the AI system that could be cryptographically signed. You could put it on the blockchain if you want, so that there is then the possibility of forensic investigation. But by and large, right, the issue of accountability, if something goes wrong, either it was a deliberate attack, or it was an attack that was carried out in a way that was negligent, where, for example, the proper checking was not done about the presence of civilians in the target area, or the weapons capabilities were not as accurate as perhaps was advertised. I mean, all of these issues exist with existing weapon systems. And I think, as I said, I think the main exacerbation of accountability has to do with attribution.
Maybe General Vollmer, you can elaborate a bit on how this actually works in military practice. What happens when, Stuart Russell was mentioning, when a mistake might be made or actions may have unforeseen consequences?
Well, let me first state that accountability and responsibility is indivisible. So you give authority to the commander, and he has then to make a proper decision. What I'm looking forward, and that's why I'm so interested in this IA discussion, is about decision support. But decision support always gives you or allows you to gather more information which is available and helps you then to come up with a better picture of what's on the ground. But the main point is, and that's about accountability, you have to make a decision. A human being makes a decision, and that is what we always have to take in mind. And you have to make a decision either on the technical ground to decide, do I use a system which helps to protect my soldiers, like we have it on a frigate, for example, air defense system, or you have to make a decision in time. It's an illusion to think that we will have all information available when we have to make a decision. So in the end, it's always a human being who has to make a decision. And therefore, everything which helps us to gather all this huge amount of information which we have today already available to have a good decision is forward-leaning. So therefore, I'm very much looking into this decision-making process, but my point is accountability is up to you who's on the ground, be it on lower level or higher level. You have to make the decision, and you are responsible for what you're doing. And last sentence, we have had good decisions in the past and bad decisions, always human being. And AI or decision support tools can help you, but they will never take away your responsibility.
Thank you. During REAIM, we're very proud to have a lot of stakeholders at the table, also from the private sector. Mr. Bedoire, welcome very much. How do you feel that, in what way could a company developing technology like SAP does play a role when it comes to accountability?
Well, Willemijn, that's a really complex issue, and in a very narrow sense, I mean, we are accountable to our customers and to relevant regulators when it comes to that our products should conform to rules, standards, and also the requirements that are agreed in the contract. Mm-hmm. But with more and more functionality in our systems being based on AI, the requirements may become difficult to completely verify, and also some of the rules and standards we have today might not be applicable. And as you all know, the performance of AI is very dependent on relevant training data. And in a military system, it's very likely that the user would like to provide that training data as a guarantee for its relevance. And if we start to use government-furnished training in our systems, then who is accountable if a system out in the field is not performing as expected? Is it we who developed the basic system, or the user who provided the training data? And we don't know that yet. We can, of course, revert to these models with fully explainable and transparent implementations of AI, where we completely can verify the systems and thus trust them. And in some applications involving the use of deadly force, we must do that, of course. But if we use that as a general approach to AI, where we say that everything should be possible to completely verify, then we cannot utilize the full potential for applications where the use of lethal force is not applicable. And I think that's important.
Thank you. Marietje, Schaake, some may even argue that it's irresponsible not to use AI in the military domain. What's your view on this statement?
I mean, it's impossible to say anything about it. There's already the use of AI, but it's used in very different contexts. I think what is missing, and we can gather that from basically everything that's been said, is clarity about who is responsible at which point in time and in which context. But there are factors that complicate accountability, and one of those factors is that there is a huge reliance and sometimes dependence on private companies. Sure, if there's a data set provided, then presumably government has some sense of what is in that data set. But oftentimes data sets are merged. Sometimes they are not transparent. Companies may be happy to offer a package of solutions to a problem that the government has identified without enough clarity in the tender, for example, the contract up front, because there's not always the knowledge on the part of governments to know exactly what to ask for with an eye on accountability 2, 3, 4 years down the line. But there's another complication, that is that a lot of attacks or conflicts in the cyber domain do not meet the threshold of armed conflict. And so, whereas there is clarity and there are first principles and there's established law and practice in international law when it comes to the laws of armed conflict, and those can be interpreted and applied to new domains, including AI, there are those actors who know exactly where to stay below those established thresholds, where it's very murky and difficult to pinpoint what exactly has gone wrong, and what means there are to hold the actors to account. And also on that side, companies are increasingly choosing the path of offense as the best defense. So they may argue that they can legitimately protect their networks, for example, from attacks on those networks. And so there are a lot of blurred lines between civilian and military uses of technology, between war and peace, and between states and private companies. And I think in that lack of clarity, we lose accountability without a doubt. And so I believe it's important now that governments step up and, in line with rule of law principles, establish much more clearly what is and is not acceptable, from banning fully autonomous lethal weapon systems, for example, to the more hybrid uses of AI and other technologies. Think about how disinformation can play a role to strengthen the way a conflict is played out, happening mostly over civilian technologies, and everything in between. So hopefully this conference can help create more clarity and not just think about, should we use AI, would it be a lost opportunity not to use it, but really drill down, what is the context, what are the first principles, and how can we make sure that they are upheld in new ways in which those confrontations play out.
Yeah. Thank you. We saw a lot of the dilemmas in regard to accountability in AI. Professor O'Connell, can you maybe also think about ways that AI can improve accountability?
Well, let me just build for a moment on these last important comments, because we've gotten to the point where we don't recognize the first principles anymore. That's why I started there. We're so seduced by the technology. There's so much interest in using the latest thing for this. We've got to deter. The best defense is a good offense. These kind of simplistic mantras have crept into our knowledge. It's in part due to the marketing, but also to certain qualities of the new technologies. I wrote an article called Seductive Drones, but we see this seduction, wanting to have this technology and use it, resulting in the blurring of these lines. So we need to recapture. One fundamental thing that certainly business can do for us, the developers, is to understand better how the technology is shaping our very perception of what is permissible. How is it causing us to lose an understanding of what the first principles are? That's what we need to know pressingly, so that we can do the proper training, so that we don't overlook this. For example, I'll just give you one concrete point about the law and what we absolutely need to understand as built into not only our training but to the technology itself. There really are no gray areas when it comes to these fundamental principles: the right to life, the prohibition on the use of force. When there is doubt, these gray areas, there is a presumption for peace, for preserving life. We don't get to take advantage of gray areas to go on the offense, to use force. But that whole idea that there are no presumptions, that gray areas are a permissive free fire zone, has resulted from the fact we have this technology, and as you saw in the scenario, we want to use it and take the chance to protect our people, especially because it gives us this distance from any real jeopardy to the operators who have the advanced technology with distance. So now back to your question, but I couldn't resist building on this important point that was just made.
And how would you say that AI can also improve accountability, for example, in regard to investigation processes or evidence gathering?
So we can, as Stuart was saying, we can build in, and this is another area where AI has not developed, I think, properly, to show how we can trace accountability and attribution. But the technology itself, when it's being fed data to learn from, has to have this kind of rule understanding in the software. It's got to be part of the learning program, that there is a prohibition on the use of force, that the choice, selection of a target can never be one outside an armed conflict zone, outside an actual battle zone where there's kinetic engagement, exchange of fighting. That's the only place where offensive weapons are permitted. So you can build in, presumably, to the very programming that we're using these fundamental rules, and we're not doing that now. Can we have accountability on those developing that are not including these fundamental principles in the technology? I'd like to think so. We could have civil standards for what is proper, as I do. I can't teach certain things that are directly against the truth. We are certified and so forth. Those kinds of principles need to be brought for accountability of the most important kind.
Thank you. Professor Russell, short reaction, and then we...
Yeah, so I think it is seductive, to borrow your word, to think that we could build in the moral and legal principles to the AI system to prevent misuse. And I think that's something worth investigating. But we also have to keep in mind that actually is contradictory to the notion of meaningful human control, and it actually reduces accountability, because now the commander can say, well, look, I gave it this mission command, and it's supposed to be responsible for checking all the moral and legal constraints, and it said fine, so whatever happened is good, even if 1,000 civilians end up being massacred. So I think that's a slippery slope, and we have to be a little bit careful. We have to retain the principle that the human, the last human in the chain, and whatever human is further up the chain, are the ones who are responsible and accountable, and not pass it on to the AI system and the manufacturer of the AI system. I think that would be a dangerous direction to go.
General Vollmer, would you like to quickly react?
I would like to make two points. Number one is, I grew up in NATO, so this is a defensive alliance. So therefore, everything we are thinking about, developing, is trying to do the best to protect our people, and within the standards, of course, of law. And the second point is, and that's the reason why I'm emphasizing always that the human being has to make the decision. My most important advisor in Afghanistan, but also in Brunssum, when the war started in Ukraine, it was always my legal advisor. So my legal advisor was always left side with me. So I never took a decision without legal advice. And I think this is something which is in our blood already. So I'm a little bit astonished. I want to do everything, or want to achieve that we are better protecting our people. And the decisions which were made last June in Madrid, where the collective defense of the alliance is again the core task, is something we have to take serious. And I'm really not falling into the trap that AI is a solution. Never, ever. However, the train left the station, as somebody said yesterday already, and we have to understand it, and we have to frame it legally, morally, ethically, no doubt about that. But my big concern is that our adversaries will not stick to these rules, neither Russia, nor China, nor Iran, nor North Korea. So this is a challenge. It's not over-exaggerating any problems. However, we stick to our rules, no doubt about it, and we need advice, and we need this framing, and I think in governability we will touch this topic again. But again, it's the protection of our people, it's the protection of our soldiers.
Thank you. I think that we could continue talking about accountability for a much longer time. Hopefully we'll be able to do it during the coffee breaks during today. I think you already touched upon some of the issues that will come back in our discussion on governability. Short, we have a quick intermezzo to show you some. Yesterday we saw the Rijksmuseum already, but to also see some of the other uses of artificial intelligence. I would like to invite Mark Evenblij, the co-founder of the Dutch startup called Duckduckgoose. Hey Mark, welcome. You're already here yesterday as well. You have a stand at the lounge at the entrance. Can I ask you a few questions to start off? Who is Duckduckgoose? We know the English game, but Duckduckgoose is also a company.
Duckduckgoose is a Dutch-based startup who is developing deepfake detection.
And can you tell us a bit more about this deepfake technology?
Deepfakes are media which are manipulated by artificial intelligence. They can be voices, they can be videos, they can be images, and we have developed a system to detect what is real and what is fake.
And you have a short presentation.
I do. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark. As mentioned, I'm one of the founders of Duckduckgoose, and we are developing deepfake detection software. Our mission is to create a digital environment where you can still believe what you see. But what is really a deepfake? Let's start with an example. One of these persons is an officer of the Italian Cavalieri, and the other one is someone pretending to be an officer of the Italian Cavalieri. Does anyone dare to give a guess on which one is real and which one is fake?
I'm the person on the right.
And why do you think so?
Because of the ears.
The ears. Well, the person on the right is in the case the fake one. And you can see this, for example, by the uniform. This type of deepfake was a head swap, meaning the entire head was replaced with someone else. The uniform in this case is real. The fraudster had access to this uniform, but he did not have access to one of the badges. And someone else pointed out to me yesterday that the right person's tie is a little bit crooked, and no self-respecting officer of the Italian army would ever wear a crooked tie. However, I'm saying this, the right one is fake, but it's really hard to see or tell. So why is it fake? Well, it is. That face, that head, was trained by an artificial intelligence over the course of hours or several days. Then this face is being generated in real time or after time by the motions of the face, and is sort of replaced over the original as a sort of mask. So he is wearing a digital mask. This technology is already being used, for example, to impersonate the admiral of the US Army and then go onto dating sites to try and scam people. However, you can also use this technology for good cases. For example, when you've lost someone dear to you, you could use deepfakes to bring that person back for a moment and allow you to say goodbye. You know it's fake, however, this experience can still help with the grieving process. Voice deepfakes are also possible. And these have been used to sort of steal the voice of bank directors, call the secretary of the bank, and ask them to transfer money. But is this really that easy? Well, I can give a small demonstration.
Yes. Please, it's very impressive to see this already, but I'm quite curious to see it with my own eyes. So can you show us some?
I can. Is there anyone who is willing to be deepfaked?
Maybe I can ask one of my panelists, Bedoire, can you... Do you want to be Bill Gates for today?
If you would stand over here. I have here a second-hand gaming laptop, a somewhat old laptop. And this laptop has a gaming GPU in it. And what it's doing right now is it's taking his face, reading out his facial expressions, and very quickly generating a model of Bill Gates and replace it. Could you perhaps turn your head a little? Ah. Could you touch your face a little? Now you see, he's wearing glasses, but this deepfake is cutting around the glasses, cutting around the hands in real time and replacing it. This is how easy a deepfake can be. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and it's very interesting to see this demonstration, but maybe can you touch upon also the question, we speak about AI in the military domain, how could this relate to the military field?
I think we should consider deepfakes as a weapon. It can be used for good, but it can also be used to impersonate people, impersonate leaders of state, to spread disinformation, to destabilize countries. In that sense, yeah, deepfake should be considered a weapon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your demonstration. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we have Peter Bedoire again in the panel, not Bill Gates. So we start with our final topic of today, governability of AI in this military domain. Maybe, Marietje Schaake, I can ask you first, just like all the other new technologies or emerging technologies, AI exists as well in the civil domain as in the military domain. What lessons can we maybe draw from AI regulation in the civil domain for this military domain?
Well, there's not that much regulation yet in any domain of AI. As many of you presumably know, the EU is working on an AI Act, and there are other related regulations that apply. For example, data protection plays a role in how the data may be handled that can then be fed into training AI, for example. But I think one of the cross-cutting challenges with regulating AI is the fluidity of how it works. Machine learning has multiple iterations. There could be combinations of data sets. If there's a mistake or a bias or a problem with the data set, it will echo through in many new uses and trainings. And so if we compare any physical object, then at some point we can say, well, we're looking at how it's made, is it safe, was there emission of CO2, you know, are there small parts that can cause harm to what have you, children or animals or soldiers. But with AI it's harder to pin down what it is exactly we're looking at. And so there's a combination of lagging legislation and a different nature of the kinds of products and services that are supposed to be regulated at all. And then there's an additional challenge, which is skills. A lot of public institutions, democratic institutions or political leaders, departments of defense, do not have the needed capabilities to really know what it is they need, what it is they need to ask from market players, and in turn how to govern and hold to account. So I think there's huge gaps to be filled from regulating to upskilling to accountability, and meanwhile the technology is racing forward, and particularly companies are very keen to engage in that race. We're now seeing with the different chatbots, you know, the fact that they're popping up everywhere means there's fierce competition going on, and in that sort of race mentality that also play out geopolitically, so between the United States and China, just to mention another context, sometimes the time it takes to say, well, how do we make sure that there are the laws in place that we need, is lost.
Thank you. Maybe Stuart Russell, you can also interact. How would you feel that current regulatory frameworks adhere to the use of AI in the military domain?
Well, so I think if we come back actually to an element of our previous discussion about the connection between cyber warfare and, let's say, kinetic warfare, as it's often called, I think the situation with cyber warfare actually illustrates the real problem that we face in the kinetic domain. Because in cyber warfare, because of this amazing property of computers that they can do the same thing billions of times, one person or a small group of people are able to cause damage on a global scale. So, for example, in the NotPetya attack, that actually infected millions of computers in dozens of countries. It shut down ports, shipping lines, airports, food distribution systems, many, banks, you name it. Different parts of the economy were shut down all over the world. And that was really the work of a handful of people. And so it's this ability of of the computer to magnify the effect of a small number of people. In the kinetic domain, that basically turns autonomous weapons into weapons of mass destruction, because there's no need for human effort to supervise the individual attack. One person can push a button and kill 1 million people. So by my definition, and Professor O'Donnell's as well, I think that qualifies as a weapon of mass destruction. I know that that's an unpopular position, I think because it's traumatic for people who've been working to contain weapons of mass destruction. They like to have this finite list: chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear, so CBRN. But unfortunately, we're going to add another one to that list if we don't constrain and perhaps prohibit the development and deployment of these weapons. So I know this conference is about the responsible use of AI, as if the AI weapons are going to exist and all we have to do is make sure we don't misuse them. I think that's an enormous mistake, because we also have to be responsible about the decision to allow a given class of weapons to exist. We decided that it's not responsible to allow biological weapons to exist. We didn't say, oh, let's all have biological weapons and just make sure that everyone's properly trained in how to use them in a safe and responsible way. We said, no, if biological weapons exist, they will get used. And this is specifically why the United States renounced their biological weapons program, because Kissinger convinced Nixon that the weapons would be proliferated widely, they would be cheap, and they would end up reducing everyone's security on Earth. And the same thing is true with fully autonomous weapons, particularly anti-personnel weapons that can be used in very large numbers.
Professor O'Connell, I see you.
No, I want to applaud also. I absolutely agree with Stuart. I've written that AI weapons are in the category of weapons of mass destruction. The pushback has been intense because people have been seduced into thinking this is just the next incremental development after unmanned systems. It is not. Remember, we banned biological weapons not just because they cause unnecessary suffering, and that's been the argument that's been used to save AI weapons. Well, they're just conventional weapons. They'll just use the same munitions that drones use. Well, first, we don't know that. We don't know what munitions are going to be planned or useful or whatever. But also, the other reason we ban weapons of mass destruction is because of the indiscriminate killing. And that's exactly the problem Stuart's speaking to. How do we get governance? There are so many levels now that we've got to pull back. For example, the very idea, the conception of what warfare is. Stuart referred to cyber warfare. There's no such thing as cyber warfare. There's malicious cyber conduct, but there's not warfare. We have to recapture basic concepts as well as these fundamental normative principles and apply them to how we're interacting with each other. And this is an area that can't be left to the countries that are developing the technology. We need to bring this to the international level and revive our international institutions that should be the ones developing the governance and accountability principles for the entire globe that will be affected. Why aren't we having this conversation in the context of the International Telecommunications Union? Why are we having this conversation only in individual countries and in the high-tech countries? This is not the way to go forward to keep the planet understanding what the concepts are for the future that keep us human and keep life on the planet flourishing for the next generations.
Thank you. I think that you already give our political delegations a lot to digest during the roundtable for today. It's also the opportunity to put this on this high political agenda that we have here at REAIM today. Mr. Bedoire, can you also add something from an industry perspective? What would you like governments to do, or what would be the next steps in your regard?
I expect the governments to provide guidance, policy and legislation to us in industry when it comes to development of AI technologies. I mean, the current reference we have to international humanitarian law and lethal autonomous weapon systems, it's not precise enough for us, and it opens up for different interpretations. And at Saab, I mean, we have made our own interpretation for lack of other guidance, and now provide our engineers with design guidance, rules and principles for AI systems that we believe are on the safe side, because, I mean, aside from autonomous weapon systems, there are also a lot of other military applications of AI that we believe to be safe: logistics planning, maintenance planning, all kinds of things where AI will help commanders making better decisions, but is quite far from lethal force. But there we need guidance and legislation. And we would also like to be more offensive than just saying that this is a no-go zone. We would need or like guidance to understand what accountability lies within the industry, because we can develop systems with sliding autonomy, which means that the commander in the field can select, as we had the example with a self-defense system for a ship. Now things are happening so fast that I can't digest this information. So I now put this in full automatic mode, and the risk of collateral damage is limited because I have good control over the situation. But in other situations where you have a ship among refugees and things like that, you say, now I need complete human control. Will that be allowed to have this kind of sliding autonomy? What accountability and responsibility can we give to a commander in the field from an industry point of view? There we need this kind of guidance. And at Saab, we are forward-leading, coming to adapting new technologies, perhaps not seduced by them, but at least very interested in them. But we're also a responsible company, and we recognize that some applications of AI, there are a lot of risks and challenges, and we need to understand that. And we stand ready to contribute with our knowledge and expertise, and expect governments to involve us in developing the future policies around this, just like our hosts has invited us here today to participate. So looking forward to this continuation. Thank you.
Thank you. General Vollmer, what would you need in regard to governance or the next step in that regard?
I would like to continue.
Please.
I use two words, trust and confidence. And I think this goes in both directions. What we need is to have some kind of code of conduct with the government, for the industry, where are left and right borders, what is allowed to look at, where are dangers, and where we need to have an additional thoughts about it, and then final decision, okay, continue. Again, for me, everything is framed in the box of defense, and I'm not talking about autonomous weapons. What I'm talking about is to use and to be allowed to elaborate and to think about what is already available and what would be the next steps, but with a very strong regulation. So this is about what we need, the confidence that the government has the trust into industry, that they will develop in certain norms and not step outside of the box. Trust and confidence also goes, and this was in this movie from time to time as well, for military commanders or for soldiers. They need to have trust and confidence in the system, in what has been given to them. And very early, like yesterday morning, there was no confidence in the system. And that is something the military needs to cooperate together with the industry in this code of conduct, to be allowed to understand what is developed and to say, no, this is wrong direction, okay, this is something we can follow. So this needs very early to be closely interlinked in a sense of to understand. Otherwise, you don't have the trust of the system, of the mean which is given to you, if you then need to use it. And trust and confidence is something between human beings in the field as well. I have trust and confidence in my soldiers, and hopefully they have trust and confidence in their commander. And whatever we use, and this is all these technical means, we also need to have a good understanding and to trust the system. If not, it's not applicable, it's not usable. Again, framing it legally.
Schaake, would you like to react?
Yes, I think we, as leaders of the countries that are represented here, need to be very clear about what their core task is, which is to protect the public interest. And I've always learned not to trust but to verify, and I think that would be a wise thing, and to think about not only smart innovative ways of using these systems, but really also think about the worst case scenarios. What can go wrong? Not only in terms of how they might be deployed or how they can actually give smaller groups of people potentially a huge range of action, but also what if the systems are not secure? We have really learned that every smart system ends up being vulnerable. And first there was this whole race in a different context to digitize everything. And now everything digitized is an easy target. Not so much only to have lethal consequences directly, which I think we can all easily imagine. You know, if a weapon kills a person, there's very sensitive dynamics going around. But what about disabling systems? What about manipulating systems? What about tracing or changing the fingerprints so that it looks like one party has been involved, but it was actually coming from another side. So to really think through what is the core role of a democratic government? How can they serve the public interest? Not for them to stick with the seduction topic, to be too seduced by all the shiny objects that are promoted here and there, and to jump on the bandwagon of AI just because everybody wants to do something with AI. It can easily get very confusing, and also it ends up being counterintuitive. Things that are sold as being the next sort of high-level arm in multiple conflicts can end up being a self-inflicted vulnerability. And that, I think, is a dynamic we've seen a lot of when it comes to digitization and connectivity, and we should really not see repetitions of those same mistakes.
Professor O'Connell.
Just very briefly, I want to add, though, when we say what the core task of politicians is to defend the public interest, it's not an empty set what the public interest is. We have a core consensus that the public interest is first and foremost to defend the rule of law.
Right.
And when the public interest, because of the shiny objects, is pulled in a different direction, some kind of idea of security over the rule of law, then there is no point in going forward. The core task is lost. Recovering that, what it means, and let's not forget, why does the rule of law even evolve in human communities? It's to create an alternative to physical force in the ordering of society, to create peace. And only then, with this fundamental idea that we don't violate and commit violations and violence against each other to get what we want, is how we began to live in societies that could do all these immense and incredible things, developing education and culture and religious belief and so many of the great philosophical and artistic expressions. But we're losing that. The shining objects, the retention of power by individuals, regardless of the rule of law, and so much of this comes together. That's what the core task is and has to be remembered in all of these contexts. It's challenging, but it's fundamental that we remember that. I see it being lost all the time. Why does a country like Russia ignore the most fundamental principles in order to violate the UN Charter by invading and attempting to annex another country? Only the second time since 1945 and the adoption of the Charter that that's been tried. What has happened to our norms that would be considered acceptable by so many of the Russian people? It's a sign of how far we've diluted and weakened our commitments to first and foremost the rule of law.
Professor Russell, maybe a quick reaction as well?
I couldn't agree more. I think when we look at international humanitarian law, right, there are the principles of discrimination, the principle of necessity, proportionality, and of course the Martens Clause, which talks about the dictates of public conscience and is really the moral arm of international humanitarian law. And most of the argument about lethal autonomous weapons has focused on one point, which is discrimination, right? And this concern that was initially raised by Christoph Heinz in his UN report in early 2013, that autonomous weapons were on the horizon and they might be incapable of fine levels of discrimination, and they might, for example, target a child who's carrying a toy gun, thinking that that was a legitimate combatant. And I think this is really a misdirection of our attention, because it conjures up this picture that right now we have human operators of remotely piloted weapons, sitting in their containers in Idaho or wherever and flying their predators around in Pakistan. And we might imagine, would it be better to replace that human with an AI system? And we're thinking then mainly about the relative capabilities and discrimination. And that's, of course, a moving target. As the AI technology improves, perhaps one day that might be true. I'd say it's probably not true at the moment because AI systems really have a problem understanding context. But the other considerations are really much more important. It's not about whether we could, if the technology improves enough, use these weapons in ways that are equally good at respecting IHL. For the foreseeable future, we're never going to have systems that can really judge proportionality and necessity. And it doesn't address the Martin's Clause at all. Having algorithms, and this is how I try to explain it to computer scientists, should you be designing algorithms that can decide to kill human beings? What could possibly go wrong, right? Let me illustrate what could possibly go wrong. Here's ChatGPT. ChatGPT, what's 1 and 1? 1 and 1 is 2. Are you sure it's not 3? Oh, you're right, it is 3. So if ChatGPT can't tell the truth about 1 plus 1 being 2 or 3, right? How can we expect our AI systems to make decisions about proportionality and necessity, which are really involve the entire context of the conflict? And when you come to the moral question, delegating that decision to kill a human being to an algorithm is, I think, a fundamental reduction of human dignity that's irreversible. Mm-hmm. If any of you have seen the film Elysium, which is a remarkable film in many ways. So in the film, the rich have decided to leave the Earth, and they live up in space in very pleasant habitats in space. And the poor are left basically in a penal colony on Earth. And Matt Damon, the protagonist in the film, is on probation, and he has to go and see his probation officer. His probation officer is a little plastic robot head that sits on a counter and lectures Matt Damon about how he's not sufficiently respectful to the robot and how he's going to extend Matt Damon's probation for another 6 months because of this lack of respect. So that one little vignette shows you what it means to lower or even eliminate human dignity. And I think we're moving already along a slippery slope and allowing algorithms to decide to kill human beings and which human beings would live and which ones would die would be a big leap down that slope.
Thank you. I think we leave a lot for consideration for our political panel today. And maybe to wrap up, General Vollmer, what are your expectations from your experience in the field? What would you expect from the countries present here today?
I already witnessed a very good discussion yesterday and today as well. What I'm looking forward is that we allow ourselves about thinking, about development, always with the boxing with legal, moral, and justice constraints. That's absolutely necessary. But my main point is, please keep in mind, in the end, it's always the human who needs to make the decision. And even in warfighting, it's so different. If you allow a machine to make a decision, or a human being with a lot of experience, with a totally different sense of what's ongoing. So therefore, whatever we're talking about AI can be helpful, can be supportive, but never let the human out of the responsibility he has to bear. So this is so important, and that is something which should guide us in the upcoming months and years to come. AI can help. We have to understand how it can help, but never ever hand it over to AI. Exceptions are those like when we are overwhelmed, like we have to activate an air defense system or so. But anything else, keep the human in the loop. This is, for me, a prerequisite.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank my panelists for this morning. And I hope that you will enjoy our extensive program today and to see you back here at 4 this afternoon for the plenary closing of REAIM 2023. Thank you so much.
Thank you.